Happy Friday. Welcome to the show. IB Nation Sports Talk, Rapid Fire Edition, up and rolling. We're here to kick off your weekend, your Father's Day weekend. Happy Father's Day to all the dads out there. Getting ready for it. Got my
I,
yard mowed today just to celebrate.
I canceled your Father's Day order.
Was there ever a Father's Day order?
I don't know. You'll see on Sunday.
Okay. Be rolling into Cleveland on Sunday after we drop number 2 off at camp and roll out for Father's Day. But Father's Day is always, Father's Day is Father's Day. But to me, it's like College World Series, Father's Day, like the College World Series always starts Father's Day weekend. It's crazy to think just 2 years ago we were in Omaha getting ready to watch the Fighting Irish for the first time in 20 years. That was a fun weekend.
It was a fun weekend. It was a memorable weekend. And I always forget that this starts right around this time.
Really?
I don't know why, but like I know it's there. You know what I mean? But I, for some reason, always forget that the College World Series starts this weekend.
The most memorable part of Father's Day weekend was probably 3 of us bunking up in a little, I don't even know how to describe it, hotel. I mean, it was...
I would say barracks.
Yeah, it felt like a barracks. We had one of those window unit refrigerators that are not refrigerators, air conditioners that did not refrigerate very well. And the 3 of us all bungled up, and all our equipment, and our good buddy Pete was slammed in there with us as well.
With the mosquito bites on his head.
That's right.
I wish we would have known.
Let's just call him Sluggo.
I wish we would have known Joe Allen, because he lives out in Omaha. He could have given us maybe a better place to stay. That anything would have been better than where we were at.
Oh my gosh, we were actually in Council Bluffs. We weren't in Omaha, but the mistake we made was, one, we didn't check for any Airbnbs. Our old buddy Joe Thaman, remember, from the 2002 College World Series team, who we saw when we were there, he got an Airbnb, and it sounded like he got a pretty good one for the weekend as well. And I think that, Brian, when he was searching, I think he only, he used one of the, what do you call it? Like find the discount hotel websites, Expedia or whatever it was, and I don't think we necessarily went to the full lengths to find us a more reputable room, because it was horrible. It was awful. Did they even have towels in the bathrooms? I know they didn't have soap in the bathrooms or shampoo in the bathrooms. That's how bad it was. And the sheets may or may not have been changed from the last people who had the rooms before us. I'm leaning toward they were not changed before the people who had the rooms before us.
I ended up sleeping on the floor at one point. So
Yes, you did.
Also worked in that little corner, and then Pete and all of his gear was exploded everywhere.
Yes, all over the bed that he just took to himself. But I think the real highlight of the weekend, you got to meet Alan Green, former Notre Dame baseball player, who was then the athletic director at Auburn. He's not the athletic director at Auburn anymore, but you got to meet Alan, and you had a couple beverages in you, and you didn't really realize. It took you a while to realize exactly who you were talking to before you realized.
That's correct. I knew I was a Notre Dame former player. I failed to realize at the time that I was speaking to the then, Auburn athletic director. And then I was pretty starstruck after that, realizing, like you said, everyone was just kind of there having a lot of fun. I'm pretty sure that was the Notre Dame. Yeah, Notre Dame won their first game.
They did. I mean, and that's when we met him, because remember, it was that night.
So like,
we go to the
spirits
team
were
hotel.
at an all-time high. Everyone was, they won their first game. Not only are they at the College World Series, but they're buzzing, and then they win that first game, and everyone goes out afterwards to kind of just, it, not only was it to celebrate, but it was like that was the first time that like everyone was like officially there. And so then it was kind of like
Right.
meeting afterwards and then also celebrating at the same time. So there was a lot going on.
And Joe says he would have rented us a room in his basement. Well, if Notre Dame makes it within the next 20 years, we'll be sure
know
to
where
put
to
you
go.
up on that. It's leaning toward not at this point. But, so what you have to appreciate about Omaha, and I don't know how much, Joe goes out, but the College World Series games end. Typically they end, we're done. We wrap up media stuff by like 11-ish, something like that. Everything is closed in Omaha. Like all the restaurants, like there are no night spots to hit. Like everything is closed once you leave the College World Series, it seems like. And so the Notre Dame team hotel was literally just right across the street, like a block away. It was right down there by Charles Schwab Field and the convention center and all that stuff. And so we go in there and it turned, it's like literally a who's who, in terms of like who's there. Alan Green was there. Brant Ust, who was one of his assistant athletic directors, another former one of the best players in Notre Dame history, was there. Paul Maneri was there. Brian O'Connor, the Virginia head coach, of course, the former Notre Dame pitching coach under Paul Maneri, and he's actually his team Virginia is playing in the College World Series as we speak. They were tied 2-2 with North Carolina, but he was there. John Gumpf was there. Deanna Gumpf was there. Chuck Ristano came down for a little bit. All the ESPN people were there. Former Notre Dame baseball players are there. And it's just like the lobby and the hotel were one. And it was just like people everywhere. It was like a who's who of Notre Dame baseball, it seemed like, was in that lobby that night.
I figured out what got me in trouble with Alan Green finally, because he was what the situation was is he was a former Notre Dame player,
right?
First and foremost. But he was the current athletic director of Auburn, so he was double dutying it. Not only because Notre Dame was there,
Auburn was there as well.
Auburn was there, and so I didn't realize at the time that he was the Auburn athletic director. And I think once I did, I asked him a question of like, well, who are you rooting for then? Like, are you rooting for Auburn or are you rooting for Notre Dame?
Uh-huh.
And I think it put him in a tough spot, and that's when it was, it was kind of just joking, and he was like, well, I have to be rooting for Auburn.
Right.
So
right.
When
it finally dawned on you exactly who he was. Yes. Yes. Was he wearing an Auburn shirt? Do you remember?
I don't think so.
It seemed like he was playing close to me as well, if I remember. I don't know.
What I enjoy about that place, even when you're not, because there's obviously four games a day, I think is what it usually is, or maybe two. I can't remember.
Two games a day.
When your team isn't playing, it's fun to be just hanging out around the stadium because there's different street vendors. There's a bunch of different like bars you can go to eat, drink, do whatever you want. And so obviously when Notre Dame was playing, we were inside the stadium, but it was equally as fun to kind of be outside and hanging around and, Pete taking a to-go salad with him and then eating it at our next
We went
bar.
to a restaurant. I mean, that's a story in itself. We go to a restaurant for lunch. Our buddy Sluggo, he's a former sports information guy. He was Notre Dame baseball sports information director for several years, including when Paul Maneri was at Notre Dame. But so we go to lunch, and for some reason, like Pete's got a pretty fair amount of salad on his plate still. And for some reason, the waitress just like clears his plate. Like when he's got food, she doesn't do the, hey, are you done with this? Do you want me to box it up? None of that. She just takes it and walks away. And so he's like, I wasn't done with that, when she comes back. And so she brings him a full salad. And so we're walking around, milling around. We end up going to the next place, and he whips out his salad inside the next establishment and starts eating his salad from the last place we were at. Well, we're partaking in beverages. So that was, I mean, if you've never had the Pete / Sluggo experience, you've got to experience it in person. But Link Jarrett's back there today. Florida State and Tennessee tonight, and this is
a good matchup.
Yeah, this is the first time that Link Jarrett has gone up against Tennessee in
Since
2
he beat
years
him.
since he was at the Super Regional 2 years ago to take Notre Dame to the College World Series.
That's the year, like Tennessee. I think that was the more surprising turn of events that college baseball season is. Not only did Notre Dame make the College World Series, but they took down the team that was ultimately kind of the number one overall seed.
They were
of
the number one
entire
seed.
thing.
Yeah.
And they were especially stacked that season. And so for Notre Dame to go into Tennessee and to take 2 of 3, and I would honestly say they shocked the college baseball community. Like, I don't think anyone would say, was predicting Notre Dame to kind of win that series and then to go into Tennessee and handle their business the way they did. That was the year everyone was fascinated with that guy that could throw like 104 for Tennessee. They had really deep pitching, a lot of good hitting. They just kind of crushed Tennessee's hopes out of nowhere.
Well, it mirrored what Notre Dame did in 2002. Of course, That was the 20-year anniversary. They were 20 years apart when Notre Dame went to Florida State. Florida State was the number one seed in the tournament, and they had actually won 25 games in a row going into that weekend. And Notre Dame took 2 out of 3 to get to that College World Series in 2002. And then 20 years later, Link Jarrett and his Notre Dame baseball team goes to Tennessee and beats the number one seed. So really a lot of, kind of synchronicity that was there. So pretty awesome. And of course, Brian O'Connor was the pitching coach on that 02 team, and he's in like his 20-some season now, 21st season, maybe
Virginia's
22nd
back this year.
At Virginia. Yep, they're, like I said, they're playing right now. 7th time Brian O'Connor has taken Virginia to the College World Series, and they had never been to Omaha prior to Brian O'Connor taking over. And O'Connor, for those who don't know the story, I mean, he's quite a story because he grew up in Council Bluffs, which is like there's a river that divides Omaha and Council Bluffs, the Nebraska and Iowa sides. He grows up in Council Bluffs. He goes to Creighton. He's a pitcher for Creighton when they went to the College World Series. And Jim Hendry, who went on to become a Chicago Cubs Major League Baseball executive, coached with Maneri in Florida. Jim Hendry was the head coach of that Creighton team. And so O'Connor, as a player, goes to the College World Series. He joins Paul Maneri's staff in the mid-'90s. He's his pitching coach and recruiting coordinator. As an assistant coach, he goes back in 2002, and now as a head coach, he's been 7 times at Virginia. And he is also featured on that statue, the College World Series statue that sits out in front of Charles Schwab at those on the steps on the home plate side. He is one of the faces on that statue, former Notre Dame pitching coach Brian O'Connor. So it was literally like O'Connor was fated to be in Omaha. So pretty cool. When I ran through, speaking of college, and we'll get to some of these Notre Dame topics here in just a second, but I ran through the Dick Rosenthal list of all the coaches that he hired yesterday. Lou Holtz, Muffet McGraw, Kevin Corrigan. He also hired Maneri. Our boy Sluggo put that up on Facebook last night. I didn't realize that he hired, because it was one of the last things literally that he did, I think, as athletic director, probably a year before he was done, he hired Maneri at Notre Dame. So, I mean, again, you talk about some significant hires that Dick Rosenthal had. Pretty amazing when you look at that list of coaches right there.
Yeah, I mean, those are all. I mean, you can make the argument that three of those coaches, you could argue, would deserve a statue at someplace at Notre Dame. I mean, Muffet McGraw already has hers. Lou Holtz, Kevin Corrigan will have his, and then if Paul would have stayed, I'm sure he would have run into some statue at some point. I mean, he's going to probably have one down at LSU. Yep. So,
if you've never been to the College World Series, I highly recommend it, though. Like what Jesse, like it's literally kind of, like almost like a carnival kind of atmosphere, what Jesse was talking about with the stuff. Now, to me, it was better when it was still up on the hill and it was Rosenblatt. There was just so much more character that Rosenblatt had compared to this stadium that they've got now that has been there since 2011 now. But maybe Paul Maneri gets back with South Carolina once again. We shall see. But I highly recommend it, especially this first weekend. Like, dads, take your kids, go to a couple games. If you're really into it, the cool part about opening weekend is not only does it coincide with Father's Day weekend, but like if you go opening weekend, all the teams are there. All 8 teams are there. They play 2 games a day, and if you stay Friday through Monday, you basically get to see everybody play twice. If you end up going to all the games. And like the cool thing with me is like growing up in Kansas, right next to Nebraska, my dad and I would always talk about going to the College World Series. And that was when Wichita State was a power of college baseball. I had a kid who I played with in high school who played on Wichita State's 1989 national championship team, Pat Mears. He ended up playing with the Minnesota Twins and Pittsburgh Pirates actually for a few years in the big leagues. But, it's like, so going to Omaha was always a big thing. We never did it. And then, like the cool thing is, my first College World Series experience was in 2002 as the radio announcer for Notre Dame. And my dad only got to come up for part of the weekend, but we got to hang out. He got to come up, hang out, eat some free food in the press box. He did his Vince impersonation, ate some free food in the press box. We hung out for Father's Day weekend. So we got to experience that for the first time together when I was, doing Notre Dame radio. So that was a pretty cool experience that weekend. But I highly recommend the College World Series, especially that first weekend, Father's Day weekend. And Salty's talking about Virginia baseball was so bad it was going to become a club team until a local benefactor, yes, John Grisham, the famous writer, gave a huge gift to get O'Connor and build it up. Yeah, he played a part in getting O'Connor there, played a part in, I believe, rebuilding the stadium there as well. It's been a while since Brian O'Connor and John Grisham have talked. John Grisham had a son who actually played there when O'Connor took over. I think it's been a while since those two have talked since then. Well, Jesse, tell you what, we're here for some predominant Notre Dame football topics. So shall we get into that? We've got plenty that we're going to get to here today.
I think we got to give the people what they want.
All right. Let's do it. So I've got some audio here, and I kind of changed this question up from what I sent you earlier. But so Notre Dame Athletic Director Pete Bevacqua was on the Stories from Notre Dame podcast this week. And I'll just go ahead and play you some thoughts that he had on independence and national championships.
I feel better about our independence sitting here right now than I felt even when I first came into the role. And I'll tell you, sitting down with Father John when we were having these discussions, we would talk to each other about our feeling about independence. And it quickly was apparent, far more important what he thinks than what I think. But independence is part of the DNA of Notre Dame football. And I believe that vehemently. And the fact that we have the new CFP deal, where from a revenue standpoint and an access standpoint, we're in great shape. That we have the new NBC deal, that we have what I think for Notre Dame is without a doubt the best coach for Notre Dame in the country, with an amazing group of assistant coaches around him. And then also importantly, Lou, with the CFP, college football playoffs, going from 4 teams to 12 teams and maybe ultimately 14 teams. And as I like to say, if you were Marcus Freeman, I mean, I couldn't even have that conversation because, for him, it's undefeated every year, never lose another game, and that's what makes Marcus. But I have to play the percentages.
Right.
And as an independent in a 14-team playoff, we have to go undefeated most likely. Maybe we can go 11-1, but that gets dicey. When it goes to 12 teams, maybe 14 teams in a couple of years, 12-0, 11-1, 10-2 are really looking good. 9-3, even 10-2, 9-3, it's questionable. But to win national championships, and we have to win a national championship in football, you got to keep knocking on the door.
So there's Pete Bevacqua, Notre Dame athletic director. And yes, sorry, K-Mac, I wasn't trying to deceive anyone. We obviously have some comments. It was never going to be a full-fledged interview. Trust me, we would have promoted a little bit more heavily if we actually had Pete Bevacqua on this show. But, so there, Jesse, you heard it. And the two out was very confident in independence, and they must win a championship. So your thoughts on hearing those thoughts from new Notre Dame athletic director Pete Bevacqua?
Yeah, I think the thing that stuck out to me when listening to, Pete Bevacqua and the way you originally kind of posed the question is when he came into it, it felt like he was questionable or uncertain himself about the whole independence thing. It felt like he maybe had the idea that, he could eventually maybe transition Notre Dame from being away from independent. And I guess that's the thing I took away. He seemed a
Or
little
maybe
bit
big
skeptical.
picture, the rest of college football world might pull Notre Dame away from independence
Right.
the way things trended a year ago when he took the job.
Yeah, it really sounded like he was on the fence. But, after listening to what he was saying, it doesn't sound like that was the case anymore. But to me, the biggest point is coming into it, it really feels like he was uncertain about the whole independence thing and how it was going to work out, going forward because of how the rest of the college football landscape was kind of changing. And then going into, the national championship part, I guess that was a little bit surprising to hear him say, that's it. That's really all that is cared about. And that's the ultimate goal, which again, always is the ultimate goal. But, he kind of was just like, 9-3, 8-4. That's really never going to be good enough. Notre Dame needs to be consistently a 10-2 team, probably, at worst, and knocking on the door for a national championship every year. And I feel like that kind of reiterates some of the stuff that we have talked about on here before. Notre Dame really can't be expected to win it every year, but you have to have the opportunity to win it every year. And then eventually, hopefully you run into one.
Yeah, I mean, and I think you make a good point. One, there's some good information in this podcast. Again, it's I'll get you the exact title of the Stories from Notre Dame podcast. And there are a lot of other things besides athletics that they talk about on the, like with different guests and stuff like that. There wasn't a ton of follow-up. One thing that led to the comment about independence was Pete Bevacqua was talking about the relationship that he has with the Big Ten commissioner, Tony Petitti. And, the question was, you're not gonna take Notre Dame into the Big Ten, are you? And he's like, no, I feel better about independence now than ever, and I think that when Pete Bevacqua came from NBC, there were some concerns, like whose side is he on and that kind of stuff. Whose interest is he going to be after? I mean, at the end of the day, this is a Notre Dame guy, almost literally from birth. His dad is a Notre Dame alum. All of his siblings, I think, except for one who went to St. Mary's, are Notre Dame alums. So they've all come here and they grew up in New York. So Notre Dame has been in the roots literally forever. And so I think when, you kind of hear you hear those comments, there's no doubt where the standard that Pete Bevacqua has set for Notre Dame and what's important for Notre Dame. I think that if staying independent is what you want as a Notre Dame fan, you definitely have the right guy. And I mean, there are obviously plenty of alums who feel like independence is the way that you need to stay on track. And again, like going back to what we were talking about with Dick Rosenthal yesterday, probably the biggest legacy that Dick Rosenthal leaves behind is that NBC contract, which he negotiated, which began in 1991 when Rosenthal was athletic director. Because if you look back at 1991, Penn State and Florida State and Notre Dame were the big three major independents. Now, there were some other independent football playing schools back then as well, like Pittsburgh, and I think South Carolina. Miami had just given up its independence to join the Big East that very year. But who's independent? Who is independent 30 plus years later? It is Notre Dame. And a huge reason why is because of that NBC contract that is still ongoing now. And they just obviously renegotiated 6-7 months ago, and is paying them more than twice as much, maybe close to 3 or 4 times as much as what it was reportedly paying before. So, I mean, that's like, you think Penn State and Florida State would like to still be independent? Absolutely. And you think that national championships are what's important to Notre Dame? Absolutely, because there are no conference championships. That's what you have to shoot for, and they go into every season. That is the expectation. And I think that kind of keeping that at the fore is very important, because the last 2 athletic directors now have been Notre Dame alums. And I think that as long as you sort of continue to have that lineage, that is going to continue to be important as long as you have that direct connection to, to the core of the school and the values that they hold with those kind of guys, with that kind of leadership. All right, so basketball legend Jerry West passed away this week. He was known as the logo of the NBA. If you were going to use a former player as Notre Dame football's logo, I mean, think about the NBA logo and Jerry West, obviously. So you're going to make a Notre Dame logo. Who would it be? And we can go one offense, one defense, if you want to go that way.
Oh. So I went with players that were to my time because I didn't get to see them or, see some of these other players that you might go with. But for me, defensively, I would go with Manti Te'o. I thought he was – good thing DK's not here. Oh, he just did get here. Never mind. Probably going to give me a hard time. But, arguably the greatest defensive Notre Dame player in my generation, a guy who, was a couple votes away from winning the Heisman. So, yeah, I'd go Manti on defense. And then on offense, this one was a little bit hard because – I felt like Notre Dame, it's hard because when you think of offense, you think of probably a guy who led Notre Dame to a national championship or, some sort of big bowl victory. And that's kind of been Notre Dame's issue the last, decade or two. But I think for me, I would go with Brady Quinn as my offensive statue. Again, I know he didn't really rack up, team accolades, but I felt like for what he was able to accomplish at quarterback, and again, during my time, that was probably the most influential offensive player.
Interesting. I was wondering where you would go with this. Manti makes sense because I know you loved Manti back in the day. And, Brady Quinn for recency, there's definitely some recency bias there. I've got to go with Joe Montana, though. Like, if I'm going, like, for the pro, like, I think Paul Hornung actually had his own kind of, there was like a Hornung silhouette logo at some point where he's like wearing a cape or something like that. Like he had his own logo, but Paul Hornung a little bit too far behind. And, like some of the things that kind of, that he said that got him knocked off the radio and stuff like that. I don't think you're going to go with Paul Hornung. Joe Montana is at least in the argument still for the greatest NFL quarterback of all time, greatest quarterback of all time. It's at least a discussion. I would give it to Brady, and I know Montana likes to say, well, I never lost a Super Bowl. Brady's lost Super Bowls, but Brady's also, of course, won 7 Super Bowls. So it's pretty hard. But what I'm saying is, Joe Montana is one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, and when he retired, there was a case that he was the greatest quarterback of all time. And you talk about cotton bowls and big bowl wins and all that kind of stuff. He's right there. Rocket Ismail was one of the guys who came to mind as well, because I think that there's a case that he is the greatest athlete to ever play at Notre Dame. Definitely the most electrifying athlete for the kind of stuff that he did in his time at Notre Dame, so I think Rocket would be in the conversation as well. But I think I would go Montana as my offensive guy, and I would actually go Jalen Smith as my defensive guy.
I can get on board with Jalen Smith. I mean, I think, you could put Tim Brown in there. I think you could put maybe Tony Rice in there. Who else could you potentially go with? Do you think you could make a case for like Tyler Eifert? Like, I'm trying to think of the tight ends, who could you go with? Because, I mean, that's an influential position at Notre Dame, right? Like, that's
true. Or would you go like Quentin Nelson even?
Or Zach Martin.
Because of the offensive line. Quentin Nelson, Zach Martin, one of those kind of guys. Yeah. I think there's cases for all of them. And I think when you think about the modern athlete and just how the linebacker position evolved in a fairly short amount of time, when you went from a guy like Manti Te'o to Jalen Smith, Smith at his prime, obviously, like before his injury, was the epitome, I think, of the modern linebacker when you talk about athleticism and everything else that he brought to the field. So what about the other sports? I thought we, could toss some suggestions out there. I don't know about you, but I've got men's basketball, women's basketball, baseball as my others. Men's basketball was the toughest for me to come up with. How about you?
Yeah, I was hoping we would save that one for last because that was my.
All right, we'll save it for last then. You want to go women's basketball first, or
Yeah,
baseball?
I thought women's basketball was not easy, but more relatively easy. I would say there's like 3 players: Ruth Riley, Skylar Diggins, and Arike Agumbawale. Those would be probably my top 3. Picking one of those 3 would be tough.
I know.
But that's my pool of 3.
I know. And those are the 3 that I would go with as well. I mean, Ruth and Arike obviously won national championships, and Skylar Diggins was sort of the revival, like the resurgence of Notre Dame women's basketball. Her arrival when they started getting back to multiple Final Fours after Skylar Diggins came, and and again, we're doing players, we're not doing coaches, because if it was coaches, I mean, if coaches were in the mix as well, it's easy because it's like literally there's a statue of Muffet. You just take the silhouette of the statue and it's there. But I think Ruth and Arike, because of the national championships, like either one of them, you couldn't go wrong with, basically. I think it kind of has to come down to one of them. What about baseball? Who are you going with in baseball? This is tough, because again, like Decaf suggested Jeff Samardzija for football.
That's kind of who I would pick
example.
For baseball, though.
And I think you might, because like he'd have like the flowing hair coming out of his hat and all that kind of stuff, and he's got that unique, kind of how he looks when he's in his delivery and everything, and I think that he is definitely, just in terms of overall fame, one of the first people that probably everyone thinks of when they think of Notre Dame baseball.
I think a wild card, though, guy who had a really good career would be Aaron Heilman, closer.
Heilman's a good one. Closer. He was a reliever once he got to the big leagues. He was a horse of a starting pitcher when he was still at Notre Dame. But
what about good old Craig Counsell? I mean, had a really good playing career and now a good managerial career.
I know I'm biased because of the 0-2 team, but Steve Stanley is like literally, like he's the epitome of just hard-nosed college baseball player. And when he left Notre Dame, he, I think he was the all-time hits leader, at bats leader, but all these different things, walks, and I'd have to even, go back and look now and see where he stands. I know he's probably got to be in the top 10 at the very least in most of the offensive just about every offensive category with the exception of home runs. He would probably be like batting average, walks, on base, again, at bats, all those different things. But so I'd include Stanley in the mix as well. Hardwood, is that Carnal?
What about
There's Trey Mancini. Mancini is a good. Nico Cavadas is a good one as well. That home run swing.
AJ Pollock.
Yep, AJ Pollock. Good major league career. I think all of those guys are
Matt
good.
Vierling. I mean, his career's not quite over yet, but you could say he's, maybe somewhat in the conversation.
Yeah.
Does Brett Lilly crack your list anywhere?
Brett Lilly was a great college baseball player, very similar to Steve Stanley. But, if you're going to throw Lilly into the conversation, then he's going to fall way behind because Stanley is still, sort of the standard, I think, in terms of those kind of. Yeah, I know you don't remember as much of Stanley, but literally, they're the same kind of, scrappy player throwing their body around, just all.
Well, that's what when you said Stanley, that's what made me think of it.
Right.
What about Brad Lidge?
Lidge, another good one. I almost
a
think
lot of these pitchers get caught up, though. You know what I mean? Like, I think Notre Dame had really good pitching, like in the early 2000s, and I think they kind of got washed of through like people's memories. But I just think that's naturally how it is, especially in baseball. You don't really, unless you're like winning the Cy Young or completely dominant, it's just more, you're naturally more known if you're a good hitter in the major leagues compared to a pitcher, I think.
Hey, good to see Brian O'Connor finished at the College World Series and jumped into the chat here, suggesting Austin Carr. Unfortunately, it sounds like Virginia lost to North Carolina in the bottom of the ninth, so that stinks. But all right, so men's basketball. This is the toughest to me. Here are the names I came up with. Troy Murphy, who left, I think, after the 01 season, had a pretty solid NBA career by the time he was done. LaFonso Ellis, of course, was another great one from late 80s. And then Pat Connaughton, of course, who just won an NBA championship with the Milwaukee Bucks a few years ago. Those were the three I came up with. I have seen Austin Carr. I've seen David Rivers. I think it's tough with Notre Dame basketball because it feels like the three I mentioned, and, again, like those are names that you remember, obviously. Jaron Grant, that's another one. Adrian Dantley, that's another one.
What about good old Luke Herringody?
Luke Herringody, the logo. Would you make him the logo?
Maybe you could. I mean, you could throw inside. Bonzi Colson in there, maybe. Didn't Bill Laimbeer play for Notre Dame?
He did, and Brian O'Connor with the Bill Laimbeer suggestion. I just think that maybe because of Bill Laimbeer's reputation, that's not who you'd want as your logo, probably.
I think if I had to go for someone who I really feels embodies Notre Dame and was a good basketball player, I think LaFonso Ellis would be good because he still has a lot of connections and roots to the university. He's, he is in South Bend frequently. He's not just, kind of off and about and casually stopping in. I think
I don't know if he still lives here, but he lived here for a while. His son went to high school. Yeah.
High school. And so I think that's who my pick would be. And then I think, second would be Austin Carr, but like that was so long ago. I know almost nothing about Austin Carr.
And that's the problem with a lot of names that people are throwing up. It's like, and not trying to, like discriminate because they've been, so far removed, but it's just like it's just been so long, really.
I think this is a better question. Of the guys who are on those Elite Eight teams, who would you pick to be the statue guy from that team? Jeremiah Grant, Pat Connaughton, or Demetrius Jackson?
Jaron Grant, you mean?
Jaron Grant. Sorry, I always get him. It's so close to it's Jeremy and Jaron. It's like literally
I know.
The last couple letters are off.
I think I just lean toward Connaughton for that team.
Just because of his versatility. I mean, he wasn't as good offensively, but obviously he was a really good defender.
Right. And probably
he's had the longest NBA career.
Yeah, again, probably biased just because he's lasted the longest professionally. He's had more staying power ultimately. You didn't answer your own question. Who would you go with? Is that who you're going with or somebody different?
No, I'd go with Demetrius Jackson.
Oh, okay. Good one too. I can't remember. They named the Marion basketball court after him. I can't remember if it has like some kind of logo. Like
I think it's his autograph or something.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. Autograph of him. That's right. All right. Well, we talked about Notre Dame's scheduling earlier this week, and Michael posted this on the YouTube comments. He says, I know quite a few of you will say I'm not a real Notre Dame fan by saying this. I'm over the USC rivalry. It becomes a much more anticipated game if it comes periodically, especially in the playoffs. There won't be much hype when the undefeated Irish go to LA to trounce the 7-4 Trojans. Yawn. That's what he says. That's what Michael says about Notre Dame USC. So he's saying play it periodically instead of every year. What do you think about that?
Michael, respectively, brother, I'm just going to have to disagree. I don't – why would you want to take away, to me, Notre Dame's best rivalry over the last 20, maybe 30 seasons now, right? and especially with USC kind of moving into the Big Ten, to me, it just makes even more sense to keep it going because USC is now tied officially to the Midwest. I think it made less sense a few years ago when, it was just Notre Dame going back and forth to California, and USC was always mad and had to play Notre Dame they had to play Notre Dame earlier in the season when they're coming to Notre Dame because they don't want to play in cold weather and all that stuff. So I think it makes even more sense. Now, I'm a huge fan of rivalries, and when I think of college football and I think of some of the best rivalries right now, I think Notre Dame and USC is at the top of that list of maybe one of the top 5, if not top 10 greatest college football rivalries.
Yeah, I mean, he says, I know quite a few of you will say I'm not a real fan by saying this. No, I think a hard majority of people will say that you're not. Why would you want to get rid of another rivalry? Like college football is losing rivalries left and right. Like we need to keep more rivalries in the sport. Why would you want to get rid of another one, especially when you're Notre Dame? And USC can say this too, but they're so tied to tradition. Why would you even think about getting rid of a rivalry that dates back to the 1920s? Like what sense does that make? So you're gonna get rid of USC and rotate them on and off the schedule. So what? You can play just like another Big Ten team or rotate an SEC team in there. Well, like he didn't give any other feedback in terms of what kind of opponents he would want to put in there in USC's place. No, the answer is no. And it's a hard sell for me. We need to keep more rivalries in college football because we've lost so many with all this conference shuffling.
To me too, it's like when you think about some of the best ranked matchups over the last 2 decades, USC games are always going to pop up in that conversation. It always feels like no matter what, if it's a disappointing season or a down season, when those two play each other, it's always meaningful. You always want to win that game. And to me, most importantly, like I am most mad after a USC type loss. Like those are the games where, okay, yeah, it's like you don't want to lose any game, but like I am even more upset if Notre Dame loses to USC. That game just has a lot of meaning and value to me, and that's the game that I try to go to the most as a fan. And again, just the games that have provided some of the best memories. Like I remember when USC came to town when I was still in high school, and they were really good. And I think this was like the Matt Leinart days, or maybe even
probably after Leinart if you were in high school. Yeah, it definitely would have been after Leinart.
I'm trying to think. It might have been Mark Sanchez. There was another guy. He was blonde haired. I can't think of who he was, but I know he was supposed to be pretty good. But anyways, me and my good friend ended up, scalping some tickets, got into the game. And the guy who sold us the tickets were actually USC fans. And we sat right next to him, and it just ended up being a good time. Some of my best memories are the USC Notre Dame games.
For sure. Keep it. Don't get rid of it. Got to keep something on there. So players from NC State's 1983 national championship basketball team are suing the NCAA for using their name, image, and likenesses without their permission for more than 40 years now. The lawsuit argues that the NCAA has used the players' images, videos, and names to promote college basketball in the NCAA tournament without either their consent or compensation. So what do you think about this? NC State players suing the NCAA for using their NIL basically without their consent.
So I understand their frustration, and logically I believe this makes sense. It's just unfortunate. I don't think this is the time and place for it ultimately. I think the NIL is a new, basically a new phenomena. And you can't go back in time and try to implement something that is now current. Because again, like, do I think that this team has a point? Yeah, I sure do. But now, if NC State wins this, there are just so many more cans of worms that are going to open for the NCAA. So many people are now going to basically cry wolf, right? Like, I should be getting this, or I should be getting that, or I think you have a lot of backlog potentially of repercussions or damages that the NCAA would have to pay to even more people
Good.
because of this, right?
Good. Because the NCAA has cashed in on the backs of the players in every sport for literally decades. And remember, these NC State players are not suing them for anything they did while they were still college players. They're suing them because the NCAA, even after these players' eligibility was done and they were completely done playing for North Carolina State, the NCAA has continued to use their names, images, and likenesses for 40 years, basically, for 40 plus years to promote their event. Like, see, this is how great we are. We're the NCAA and amateurism and yay, and all this different. So they continue to use these players without their consent. I think that they have every right to go after them. It would be one thing if the NCAA only used this stuff while these guys were still playing, but they have done it since their playing days ended. I don't think that you get perpetuity to use that kind of promotional stuff when you're talking about literally the names and faces of the players. So I hope they get them, because the NCAA has literally made billions of dollars off all the play in whatever sport that it happens to be forever. And so I hope that they win this thing, because, to the NCAA's point, if you look at the roster of that NC State team, very few of those guys went on to have, like long, really lucrative professional basketball careers. They all had to go off and do something else. And the NCAA continued to use them because they were this great Cinderella story, and the NCAA exploited that to their own, to their own purposes as much as they could for as long as they could. So I hope they get them. I hope the players win this. I don't know if they will.
I do too. I just think that they're going to fight this thing so hard because they don't want everyone coming back and saying, well, you owe me this for this, or you owe me this for that. You know what I mean? But I think the NCAA is one of the most greediest, or the most greedy, institutions that there is. And like you said, they've been functioning off the exploitation of a lot of, players, coaches, etc. over the years. And it's now time for a lot of those players to get their, dividends, essentially.
So Matt Barkley was the USC quarterback you were looking for, huh?
Yes.
Okay. Gotcha. So Tom Brady says Family Feud would be the game show he would most like to go on. He said it on the SI Media podcast. What past or present game show would you most like to go on, Jesse?
I would think I have like a list of 4. First would be The Price is Right.
Okay.
And that's guaranteeing that like I get up there and actually get to play. Like I'm not just going there to sit in the stands and hopefully get my opportunity. That's like assuming that I go on and play. Deal or No Deal, I think, is another one that I would have really enjoyed. Survivor, I don't know if you count that as technically like a game show, but it is a game and it is a show. So I'd go with Survivor. And I think the last one for me would be The Amazing Race, because I think it would be fun to be like racing through different countries and all of that stuff.
We talked about doing The Amazing Race a while back, and I was talking to Vince about it as well. And then none of us ever, put together any, like maybe now, since we host this fancy podcast, we could use this as a demo for The Amazing Race and try to get on there, father and son or something like that.
I think we could do it.
I think we could. I think it'd be a lot of fun. Mine would be, I forgot about The Price is Right. Wouldn't mind that. The old Match Game. I think they tried to bring Match Game back a few years ago. The old Match Game with Gene Rayburn, when Richard Dawson used to be, one of the celebrity guests on there all the time, and Charles Nelson Riley and that whole crew. Like, that was always a lot of fun. So I think Match Game would be there. And of course, one of my personal favorites, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, would be the other one.
See, like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, Jeopardy, Wheel of Fortune, those all sound good. I just don't know enough.
Yeah.
And that's the thing is like
Jeopardy.
it would be a
Jeopardy
lot of fun.
is the toughest. Like, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? Because you got, like the phone a friend and, the different things that you can like kind of help you out a little bit along the way. If you really get stumped and everything's multiple choice, feel better about that. I qualified twice on the phone back when Who Wants to Be a Millionaire was in its heyday with Regis Philbin, but they never called me back for the next step, so I never got on. Still haven't gotten over it, so I would do that. Amazing Race, though. That's up there. Andre, going back to what we were talking about, shouldn't the NC State players just sue their school as well? I mean, I don't know to what extent the school has used it, but the other side of that is if you like by being on good terms with your school, that gives them other avenues, like to come back, to potentially, make some money for appearances and different things like that. Keeping a good relationship with your alma mater, I think, is always a good thing. So that's probably, part of why that has never happened with their school. Salty says your work on this show would mitigate against you. Man.
Wow.
Tough
words there.
Suck it, Trebek.
So what do you think Ken Jennings, the
new
Jeopardy
guy?
star, what do you think his net worth is? Because, I mean, he got rich off of Jeopardy. So what do you think a guy who literally made his entire career off of Jeopardy, what do you think
What did he do? What did he do before he, went on the Jeopardy run? Do you know?
I'll look real quick.
I'd say, maybe his net worth $5 million, something like that, since he's the main host now.
He was a software engineer for a healthcare service.
Okay.
His net worth, $4 million. So you were pretty close.
I was in the ballpark. Okay. K-Mac was close as well. He said $3 million. Okay, so we see this one periodically on the Champions Lounge from people coming to town, South Bend, for the first time. The must-visit restaurants in South Bend. This was up this week. Do you have any must-visit restaurants in South Bend that you would recommend to people, Jess?
Oh, that's the thing is, to me, there's not a ton of like just authentic food.
I know that's the problem with South Bend, right? A lot of chains.
Yeah, a lot of chains. I'm trying to think.
Honestly, the ones that I would recommend first are actually breakfast places. I've seen, again, like a lot of just sort of run of the mill. There's a place called Early Bird. It's a local place in South Bend with really good breakfast food. It's in downtown South Bend. And then now it's not South Bend, but there are two places that I would recommend in Elkhart, which is obviously, only about 15 minutes from here. Tipsy Biscuit. It's another breakfast place. Early Bird and Tipsy Biscuit. If you come to South Bend and you're going to go to breakfast, call and make a reservation because they are slammed all the time on the weekends. But Early Bird is in South Bend. Tipsy Biscuit is in Elkhart. Both are very good. Call and make a reservation. And the other place, which is like a block away from the Tipsy Biscuit in Elkhart, is a brewery called Yakida. Really good local craft beer, and they do good pizzas as well. Those are three of the better places. Otherwise, like there's some decent pizza places in town.
Yeah, like
but other
Barnaby's.
Than that, yeah. Other than that, there's just unfortunately a lot of kind of all over the place.
Who do you think you'll be able to get some of mine?
Like what you would go with?
Yeah.
Oh man. I don't.
I think my palate's a little bit more diverse than yours.
Well, it might be. I mean, usually, like especially now when you come back, if you go out to eat, I go out to eat, and I don't remember. Like, I don't know. What are you going to say? Like Cheddar's?
No.
Like
Cheddar's is a chain. You can get Cheddar's.
I know Cheddar's is a chain. And that's the problem. There just aren't a lot of great local places in town. So, what are you going with for your local places here in South Bend?
So I like Fiddler's Hearth in downtown.
Fiddler's Hearth. Come on, Jesse. Speak.
Fiddler's Hearth. Sorry.
That's actually not bad, and I forgot about Fiddler's Hearth. I mean, it's like
Good Irish food.
Irish pub food. Yeah.
I don't think you can go wrong there. I like this place. I don't know if you're allowed back. Crooked U is a good place to eat at. I know you don't really care for their beer too much, but they do have good food there. I do enjoy their food.
It is solid.
Barnaby's made my list. I mean, either Barnaby's or I don't know why I can't think of the other place. Bruno's, Barnaby's or Bruno's. Those are my. A lot of people say Rocco's. I've just never. Rocco's is Rocco's.
We've just never been Rocco's people.
Right.
A lot of people really love Rocco's, but we've been much more Barnaby's than Rocco's since we've lived here.
I would say LaSalle Grill, but that's a little bit nicer, more high end. That's like, I wouldn't just, if someone asked me like, hey, where should I go? I wouldn't go LaSalle Grill. I think that's like if you want to go somewhere nice, or if you're like trying to woo a woman or something, that LaSalle Grill would be a good choice. And then I really like this place downtown called Cambodian Thai. That has really good Thai
that's
food.
right. You and your mom really like that Thai food, and I'm not a Thai food person. So
Josh brings up a good point. The View has a good burger. I would agree with that.
The View burger. A lot of people like CJ's Pub, the pub burgers down there. Hall's Kitchen. I've never even heard of that place. Have you?
I don't think so.
Tippecanoe. Yeah, Tippecanoe's not bad. And they've actually, on the second floor, they put in kind of their own, they've got their own little micro brew type place, like pub food, a little more casual in there as well. We used to go to, we hit Tippecanoe for the Thanksgiving dinner a few years in a row there.
Do you like evil? Yeah, Tippecanoe place does have good food. It's just a little bit nicer. And it's in like this huge, it's in an old mansion basically. And so when you go in there, it's like not overwhelming, but like, again, it's like this big old mansion that now just kind of has random, seats everywhere. Do you like Evil Check's food?
I like the food, but I'm not big on Evil Check's beer because it's a lot hoppier than I like. A lot of hops in their beer there.
There was this place that was close to you guys. I don't know if they're still there or not. I like Beebs and Ash burgers. Those are like smash burgers.
They moved it out to Granger. That's actually a good place. And the first one was in Goshen, and then they branched out. They had one right down on the Riverwalk here in Mishawaka. They moved it out to Granger because all good things go to Granger, basically. So.
Yeah, Mishawaka and South Bend are like the pilots. And if
you know what? Here's the one, and I don't know why I didn't think of this earlier. Yesterday's
oh,
out in Granger.
You guys always. I think the last time you guys went there. Well, actually, the mom got sick when you guys went there, but I don't think it was because of the food. I think it was her pancreas.
I think, or
gallbladder
or whatever it was.
At that time, you guys were a little like, kind of iffy on it. Brent asked about sushi. I know you don't care for sushi, but Wuchi is really good sushi in South Bend. That's the place I would recommend. Do you like the Prize Pig for barbecue?
Yeah, it's good.
Is that considered South Bend though, or is that Elkhart?
I think the Prize Pig. There's two different places. There's one in downtown Mishawaka. There's another place in Roseland, or right over, like in Roseland. Two different barbecue places. They were started by people who used to work together, and now it's like those are the two non-chain barbecue places. The only, there's Frankie's Barbecue that's been around for a long time on the west side.
But Frankie's Barbecue is like walking up to a stand. The funniest, funniest.
Frankie's is interesting because, depending what what part of the country you're from and what your stance is on barbecue. Frankie's throws all their, stuff in the barbecue sauce, which to me is like you don't do that. You don't put the meat in the sauce. You serve the meat plain and you let people sauce their own food. That's my take on it.
My biggest experience with Frankie's is when I was in high school. I think it was my sophomore year. Our varsity coach at the time was, I think you could read the writing on the walls towards the end of the season. This was for baseball. And we were going over to play Washington, I think in a doubleheader, or at least one game. and he makes a deal with us. And I can't remember if it was, win one game or win both of the games, whatever it might be. But he basically was like, if we win these games, I'll get us all Frankie's barbecue afterwards. Right. And we played the best we've ever played. And sure enough, our bus pulls up to the west side on Frankie's, and we all, get out and get a platter full of Frankie's barbecue. So
yeah,
that was always a good memory. What about?
Well, hold it. Let's answer a few of these here because people are throwing some stuff up. Joe says, "How about a pizza place?" We mentioned some pizza places. I guess we didn't say specifically they're pizza places. Barnaby's is the one that we've always gone to. Bruno's is another good one. Even though, like Bruno's, I don't even know, do they even have dine-in Bruno's or are they all just delivery joints now?
No, they have some dine-in Bruno's.
Do they?
What I like about Bruno's is
Rocco's is the other one that's close to campus that everyone likes.
During lunchtime, you can walk into Bruno's and they have a nice, get a slice and a 2 slices and a drink or something. They have.
I don't think that place is there anymore. The one that is down the street from Adams. I don't think that's there anymore. Parisi's, that was a pulmonary favorite right near Notre Dame. A lot of people like Parisi's. That is Italian food, obviously.
What would be your go-to Mexican place?
I really don't have one. It's just like whatever, wherever we go. There's just like, oh yeah, let's go to that place.
Wasn't there a Don Chepe somewhere?
I don't know. I think there's a place called Puerto Vallarta that we've been to. It's not bad.
Have you tried Fatbird yet? The chicken place?
No.
I've heard good things about that. I haven't been yet, though.
Josh says Hall's Kitchen is newer. Location in South Bend, Mishawaka, Elkhart. South Bend location is the diner. Oh, it used to be the diner. So basically catty corner from Adams High School. Okay.
Nice.
Have to check that out sometime. Salty wants to know how long the list is of places I'm not welcome to return. And for Joe, yes, we will have to bring this back before the season. Again, I don't know how helpful it is because I don't know. There are places to eat in South Bend. Are there a lot of excellent places? Unfortunately, I don't think so. And if you own a restaurant and you think otherwise, then throw some sample food and we'd be glad to try it and let you know.
Do you think at this point you've just lived in South Bend for too long? You just become saturated,
just so kind of used to everything. I mean, literally, there's a lot of chain stuff. Like I said, there's a lot of chain stuff, and again, like most of the local stuff that I like is just the pizza or the barbecue, I guess. Again, like there's plenty of different Mexican places that we go to, but I couldn't.
None of them really stand out.
Couldn't tell you the name off the top of my head. There's just some solid, authentic Mexican food all over the place, I think. So, yeah.
I'm trying to think if there's any. Oh, I know what I was going to ask. What would be, because of Muffet and because of Paul, there was a lot of heavy Italian influence, places you guys would eat at. Would you say Parisi's was the best amongst the Italian food in the South Bend area?
It's funny. Your mom never cared that much for Parisi's. And I always thought it was pretty good. It's been a long time since I've been there, but
yeah, but you got so worn out on I remember you'd be like, we're not eating Italian because I've just been stuffing myself with Italian.
Literally for years. Because you're right. Between traveling with Maneri and the Notre Dame baseball team and Muffet and the women's basketball team, they all like to eat Italian food quite a bit. And I just got worn out on it.
Does Neil have like a preference, or is it just kind of?
It's different now because most everything is just like we don't go out a lot. It's all catered team meals, inside the hotels for the most part. Very, very rarely do we, actually like when you get to the NCAA tournament and some of those different things. There are times that we'll go to some place, or like actually right after the holidays, it seems like if we're on a road trip, we might go someplace. But in general, it's catered meals in the building, and then afterwards there's quite a variety of different kinds of places that that we'll order some food from, like that we'll get on the bus as we go to the plane to the airport and that kind of stuff.
I think the last thing I'll say on this topic,
Campaños. That's not a bad one. That's a pretty good one. Out there in Monterey, you're right. Bro.
Not food, but still good. I think you have to go to the South Bend Chocolate Company. I know it's not food, but they have really good chocolate, and especially if you're visiting from out of town, it's something nice that you can, kind of stock up on a little bit and take back with you and share amongst your family or have for yourself. Like I think South Bend chocolate is some of the best. Yeah, some of the best there is.
Really good. And it was funny because we went back to Kansas for Christmas one time, and the wife, we went into this little shop and they were selling South Bend Chocolate Company chocolates in the shop in the middle of Kansas. So, and we were like, "Oh, we're from South Bend," and they kind of looked at us like, "So."
We just sell your chocolate.
That's right. We just sell the chocolate. I don't really care where it's from. All right. Well, that's going to do it for tonight. I should mention, coming up on Monday, Jesse and I are both going to be off next week. So I mentioned this earlier in the week. We're going to be in different places, but so there won't be an IB Nation Sports Talk show in the evenings. Brian and Vince are going to have things taken care of throughout the afternoon. Monday morning, though, we're going to drop a special kind of it's a special podcast, basically. Steve Stanley, Steve Solman, Brian Stavisky from Notre Dame's 2002 College World Series team. Monday, June 17th is the anniversary of the 2002 team's win over Rice at the College World Series. It ended on Brian Stavisky's home run. We did this a couple of years ago, but maybe if you didn't hear it a couple of years ago, I talked to the three of those guys who are all the big factors in that ninth inning comeback win over Rice at the College World Series. I, of course, was the radio announcer for that team, and we used some of the calls, kind of go back through the inning, almost pitch by pitch, and kind of relive some of those memories and get the insights from Stanley, Solman, and Stavisky on that. So we're going to drop that pod Monday morning on the anniversary of Notre Dame's comeback win over Rice at the 2002 College World Series. So thought that would be fun to kind of revisit that once again.
You might as well just link your call to it as well. That should be part of the podcast.
It's all, the calls are part of it. The calls are in that podcast. So like we'll talk for a little bit. We play a little bit of the play-by-play. Then we come out of a play-by-play cut and we talk about sort of, what just happened, what's coming up, talk a little bit more play-by-play cut. We go through the whole bottom of the ninth inning that way with calls through there. So it's pretty cool. It'll drop Monday morning so you can listen to it since you obviously never did, Jess.
I just, it's left the data bank of memory. Cloud, the cloud storage gets so full, you just got to start pushing storage out.
That's it. All right. Well, everybody, all the dads out there, have a great Father's Day weekend. Have fun. Stay safe. Jess and I will be back in a couple of weeks. Brian, Vince, Ryan, they will all be here next week. So
enjoy the weather.
Yep, that's right. Enjoy it all. Have a great weekend, and we will talk to you later on IB Nation Sports Talk.